now we're going to take a look at the Scheveningen. We kind of looked at it in the last lecture when we transposed from the Najdorf into the Scheveningen, but this time, instead of playing A6, we just play E6 immediately, and we go into that very strong defensive sort of setup. You're basically saying, okay, come attack me, and good luck with that. And in the meantime, you know that you're going to have a lot of counterattacking chances and a really good endgame. And especially, these kind of openings are good to have in your repertoire if you're playing against someone who's really used to seeing E5 as a response to E4. They want to go into an Italian or a Spanish or a Gioco piano or a 4-9 opening, something like that. You play the Sicilian. Maybe they're familiar with a few lines of the Sicilian. They've seen the dragon. They've seen this or that. But when you have the Scheveningen and the Najdorf in your back pocket, you know these variations, especially in blitz. You're going to get a lot of really good positions because your opponents will be less prepared than you. And that's the goal of studying the openings, right? Be more prepared than your opponent. So, as I said, instead of playing A6, we play E6. And then what we usually have in the Scheveningen, if white is versed in the opening, is instead of playing the English attack or some of the other attacks that we've learned, although you still can play the English attack, they will go into a different setup, which I will show you now. This is one that is known as, it's known as the Keres attack, depending on the move order that you play, or it's just the main line of the Scheveningen. So we're going to kind of look at the main line of Scheveningen, which I showed you part of in a previous lecture. So we're going to go ahead and get castled early here. And usually, instead of playing queen to d2 immediately, depending on the move order, white can play bishop to e2, say we castle, and then play an early f4. And so in this case, they're trying to take control of the center, which we basically let them do by not playing the Najdorf, by not playing the dragon. It looks like we're setting up in a way that is very passive, but the Scheveningen is very solid, and it also allows for good counterattacking chances. Now, we may want to play this Najdorf move a6, but the move order is the only thing that makes it different from the Najdorf. We play basically, if we play a6, now we're playing a Scheveningen with a Najdorf move, whereas before we played the Najdorf move and then we transpose into Scheveningen. The real move that makes it a Najdorf after you play a6 is the e5 pawn push. So the two openings are really similar. It's kind of it's a move order thing, but the results after some of those transpositions will be very different positions depending on what white plays. So let's say we want to play out our knight out to here, and black will usually, or white will usually castle short in this case. Once he's played f4, he wants to have a rook behind this, and he's going to eventually attack either on e5 or on f5. And so what we do here in this case, there's a couple different ways that we can do it. We usually want our queen to be on c7 so that we are defending this central pawn push. Then if they play d5, we have our pawn, our knight, and our queen defending it. So we have three pieces defending it, so it's very solid. We can just take it. So it makes it so they can't do that so easily, and they have to wait before they make their pawn push. And while they're waiting, they'll have to rearrange their pieces and bring them over to the king side, while we also have time to rearrange our pieces. So you can either play queen to c7 right now, in which case a lot of amateur players will go like this with their knight and attack the queen, but you can actually just put it on b8, which kind of looks like the Chinese dragon a little bit, and then just make his knight move in the next move. So let's say, for example, he wants to move his queen over, we can just make his knight move back, and then we can just gain tempo here. So actually, if he does that, it ends up helping us because we'll knock him back, and then we have, again, as we've seen in many scenarios, we have this pawn to b4 move that we can make his knight move and get our pawns rolling on the queen side. And the queen's actually not in a bad position right here, even though it looks like we don't normally want to have our queen on the back rank. It's helping to support pawn push. It's also continuing to defend this important e5 square here. Although in this case, we actually would drop a knight, I just noticed. So we have to be careful about that. We just wouldn't move that b5 pawn yet. So once he went back, we would either trade off this knight right here, or we would defend it first with the bishop, for example. And let's say he wants to move his queen over. Now we do have this move. Actually, we don't. Now we can move this forward, and if he wants to take the knight, it's fine. We just take back with the bishop, and now actually that helped us. So you got to be really careful when you're making trades when you're the attacking side. it may help develop your opponent's pieces and get rid of your attacking pieces. So in general, we want to keep our pieces on the board when we're the attacker. We want to get the pieces off the board if we are the defender. Okay, so this is a really typical scenario, but if we don't want to play queen to c7 right away and allow the knight to come down, it's just a choice of move order. We can play the a6 move first, and then we can play this queen move. Put it right there. It's a really logical spot to be. Still aims down the board. But the main reason we want the queen here in the Scheveningen is to defend from white pushing this pawn down and hitting us here. So it's a really strong place for it to be. A typical maneuver for white in the Scheveningen is also to rearrange their bishop here to f3. What they do by doing that is they're both defending this pawn and also preparing for later on, if it makes sense, to push pawn to e5. And even though we're defending that square, now it opens up this bishop onto this diagonal. Depending on what we have done with our pieces, it can be a nice setup. It can also allow the bishop to later on in the attack it's going to move down and be flexible. And so let's say we just set up our pieces in normal fashion. Now white's got a pretty good attack here. They can choose to either push this pawn on the f file forward or the e pawn forward, and we are looking to defend. We're defending all those things, and we're looking to expand as usual. So again, we have a really similar type of a Sicilian defense setup, and that's good. We know what we're trying to achieve. We're going to have queenside expansion. We're going to be playing some defense, but each position is different, and each position will be more or less comfortable for you depending on how well you know the themes. So one of the key things to know is just which setup to choose depending on what your opponent does, right? If they go into the Fischer-Sozin attack with the bishop, we play e6 and we go into a Scheveningen, okay? If we want to avoid the English attack and all those different openings, I think in the Najdorf or against the Adams attack, which now has been shown to be really effective against the Najdorf, just play the Scheveningen instead. Or play the dragon if you're prepared to defend if they play the Yugoslav attack, right? So it's a matter of preference for you and which opening you feel most comfortable with. But when you're well versed in all of them, you will get a good position no matter what because you have chosen the correct line for the most concrete, strongest lines against each opening setup. And so just to continue a few more moves to see what might happen here, white can pawn storm right now. They can look to just immediately try to open this position up. A lot of times, as I said, the best thing to do is ignore it. In this case, we might want to actually take and just trade pieces off if you were to do that. And notice that this piece trade is beneficial for black. Now we have a lot of things opening up, and their attack is gone. So again, you want to be patient when you're the attacking side. You don't want to necessarily push your pawns forward until you are ready. Let's see what happens if we push this pawn forward. And we simply capture. Takes, takes, takes. So in this case, we had enough pieces to defend. You can make this dangerous pin, but then of course we can trade because it's with check. And again, the attack is pretty much done for if he chose to make such an early pawn thrust, okay? And so the lesson for the attacker is to be patient and wait till you have more pieces before you make these pawn pushes. And the lesson for the defender is to be calm and just make sure that you've got all your bases covered. White might instead choose to move their rook over and double their rooks on this right here, or they can play h4 and look to attack this way. Maybe move the queen over. So for example, we do something like this. Move the queen over here. They wouldn't want to do that actually, they would lose material. But oftentimes, moving your queen out of the way and then pushing these other pawns forward, maybe by going there, can be a good thing to do. Something like this. And now the attack is coming with lots of pawns and lots of pieces all on the king side. That's another thing that may happen in this opening. Okay, so just another example. You've got to play it a lot to get familiar with how things will go down. And notice this is a very dangerous situation to be in right here for black. But our setup is solid, and we have counterattacking chances. And so you've got to go out and practice it, see what happens in your games, and feel free to post in the discussion after you play with these openings. Tell us what your results were. Share some PGNs in the discussion board, and share with the community so that other students of the course can benefit from the experience you had in your games.